Bienvenue à tous. Welcome to Reporters here on France 24. South Sudan's peace deal was perhaps the one accord that united almost everyone in one belief that it wouldn't work. Yet here we are, a year later, and the peace deal appears to be, on the whole, respected. Nonetheless, there are still major issues facing South Sudan. 4 million people are still internally displaced, refugees within their own country's borders. 2 million have fled beyond the frontier to neighbouring countries like Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, even the old country, Sudan. Well, Bastien Renouy is this week's reporter. He joins us now. He's coordinated the report on South Sudan, where the problems affecting the world's newest state revolve around two rival leaders, Salva Kiir and Riek Machar. Bastien, thanks for being with us. I'm wondering how this peace deal has managed to survive over the past year.
Well, the fighting has stopped in the vast majority of the country since the signature of the peace agreement and of the ceasefire. There were a few ambushes in the first weeks after the ceasefire, but nothing big compared to the 5 previous years of civil war. There are still a few rebel groups in the south of the country fighting the government, but in the vast majority of South Sudan, the peace deal is now implemented.
Bastien, thank you very much indeed. Do stay with us. Let's take a look now at the report from Juba, South Sudan.
It's a celebratory mass at the Church of St. Mary in Bentiu. General Tor, a local rebel leader, was finally able to move freely in government-held territory and visit the largest IDP camp in South Sudan. To his left sits a government minister. Thanks to a peace agreement signed in September 2018, the two men can pray together after 6 years of fighting a bitter civil war.
If we want this to happen, we have to replace the culture of fear with a culture of peace. If we don't forgive each other, we will all die, and there will be no country.
Meetings like this are becoming more common across the country since the handshake between President Salva Kiir and rival Riek Machar, the leader of the armed opposition. There have been many peace deals and ceasefires over the last few years, and all of them have been broken. So Father Joseph is cautious and direct.
What I can tell you, Governor, is that we need peace. We do not want peace that will lead us to war again. So to you who make war, tell us the truth.
The vast majority of those living here are Nuer, the ethnic group of opposition leader Machar. They're living under the protection of the United Nations, in fear of continued massacres carried out along ethnic lines. 1,538 peacekeepers are deployed permanently around the camp. The conflict in this region, Unity State, was especially brutal, due in large part to its oil deposits. In these images from 2014, government soldiers celebrate a victory over rebels who previously held the territory.
They ran away, and we don't know where they ran. We have killed some of them, and some they ran with their guns.
At the time, the military ensured civilians that they could safely stay in their homes, despite the near-complete destruction of their city.
We try our level and we defeat them back, but the situation is normal. Even the civilians are on forces to come back.
But just a few weeks later, one of the bloodiest massacres of the war shook Bentiu and forced tens of thousands of people to flee to the camp. Nyayang has lived here since that battle, her life contained to this small slice of Bentiu controlled by the UN after the city was leveled in the fighting. The displaced are crowded into makeshift shelters, and access to the basics, like water, are limited. Residents here are anxiously hopeful that this peace deal will hold and that their lives will finally improve.
Be patient, and the day will come when things will be easier for us.
In the meantime, we stay here. We don't have money.
I don't know what this peace treaty will bring to us. It's the men who deal with it. Us, the women, have to work to bring something to our children. We don't know anything else. I can't explain what's going on. I'm just a woman.
Yang lives here without her husband. He was a captain in the rebel army and sought refuge in neighboring Sudan after he was shot in the leg. She hasn't heard from him in 3 years. Her situation isn't unique. Many women in the camp are in similar circumstances, and they try to support each other.
Even we don't have time to rest. We have nothing on top of nothing. We leave in the morning and we come back late at night.
It's true I have to work, and if I leave without someone watching our shelter, we'll be robbed. You have to stick around, keep watch, and when you're not around, you have to find someone.
Restless after 5 years in the camp, and after a few months of calm, Yang decided to try to leave. It's now possible to commute to town, and taxis run from the camp daily. Attacks still take place occasionally, so the roads are risky and have to be secured.
I want every one of you to be alert. You are ready to do the right thing properly. Things can happen at any time. We will start from Sierra Point 8. There may be civilians who look like soldiers, so I ask you to be vigilant. We will start the patrol very soon. We must expect to see a lot of movement throughout the area.
Blue helmets patrol this route several times a week. Even though there's no fighting around Bentiu now, women are still at a high risk of being assaulted, often targeted for their ethnicity.
So we are shown to them the UN's power and the UN's working on there. This way is someone is looking on the way. So the criminals avoid to go out from the rotations, go the sites.
The women they meet along the road are out collecting the firewood they need to prepare food. It's impossible for them to do so safely outside of the patrol.
Before the UN patrols, it was very dangerous for women. The soldiers scared the girls and women.
Despite the current ceasefire, the patrols are an important show of force.
Peace agreement just started, maybe not too long, yeah. So we need to stay in here, and we need to more safe condition. When we build the more safety situation, that time we can go out.
A few minutes later, 2 government soldiers cross their route. Before, these men may have meant grave danger for the women. Now they warmly greet the Mongolian battalion.
We're not on patrol. We're just going to visit our families after the river in Mankwek. There are no patrols since the signing of the peace deal. By the way, when we meet opposition soldiers and we pass through their territory, there will be no problem.
As the military wraps up their patrol, critical talks are taking place in Lair. The city was decimated by the war, and much of its population fled. Now, peace negotiations are ongoing here.
Will come and follow you.
The governor received one of the regional rebel leaders with the aim of discussing how to bring their 2 armies together and to bring a definitive end to the conflict.
We want to finalize and make sure that peace will across all those borders. And we don't want any person or one of the youth to go and loot it, the cow either from Denka side or from Nuer side. What my advice, when you reach that
The peace deal mandated a transitional government be in place by May 12th. But the negotiations didn't move swiftly enough. They've been given another 6 months to bring government and rebel armies together.
And then we give orders to our soldiers. If you are the soldier and our side has a government, please make sure that to report yourself to the barrack. If you are the soldier from the SPLMIO, make sure that to report yourself to that cantonment area. Because we don't want intimidation, eruption, and whatever.
These negotiations have given renewed hope to the South Sudanese. And in Bentiu, the displaced are slowly coming back to the town, trying to rebuild it. We find Nyang here.
Hello.
Since January, she's worked at a small restaurant with some friends. They're among the first residents of the IDP camp to start working again in the town.
Most women can't have these activities. In the future, we have to be given money to finance these kinds of projects. This would help women to leave the camp.
The promise of a steady income also brings the prospect of getting back to normal life.
We are very grateful. The help that he gave us allowed us to have this restaurant, whereas before, the only thing we could do was to find some firewood and try and sell it.
Nyang's family has found a small plot of land in town, and her sister lives there with their kids. But she's not ready to move there permanently yet. She's scared of losing everything all over again, as many did when the war broke out and other peace deals collapsed.
We don't know if the war is truly finished yet. Tribal conflicts have always existed here, even before the start of the Civil War. We have always faced war. We grew up with it, so I'll keep my shelter in the IDP camp. So if war breaks out again, I can be safe there with my family.
Every night, she goes back to her place in the camp. More than 10,000 people have left their shelters here in recent months. But like her, those who choose to stay in the camp dare not pin their hopes on lasting peace. The wounds of the war here are too deep to close so quickly.
Our reporter Bastien Renouy is still with us. Bastien, thanks for that fascinating insight into South Sudan. I'm wondering now, is there any chance that the opposition leader one day might be back in Juba?
Well, that's very difficult to say, and for many reasons. The first one is that Riek Machar, the leader of the opposition, and Salva Kiir, the president of South Sudan, hate each other. It was the main difficulty during the peace negotiations. According to a few sources who were part of these negotiations, the two men cannot talk to each other after what happened during the past 5-6 years, after the civil war and all the atrocities that were committed. It was a very big issue for them. Then there is a political situation. The two men are supposed to negotiate a transitional government. This government was supposed to be implemented in May, and we're still waiting for it. And then there are security concerns. Please listen to the head of civilian affairs of the UN in Bentiu.
Talking with the IO, most of them are of the opinion that security arrangements in Juba is not, in their opinion, good enough for Dr. Machar to come here. And they are quick to point out what happened in 2016.
Well, Bastien, given how the South Sudanese people have suffered, it's hard to see how they could begin to coexist together in a peaceful manner.
Yeah, exactly. It's very difficult to imagine how they could coexist after all the atrocities they had to face. I've been traveling a lot in South Sudan, north to south, east to west, and everywhere in the country you can hear the same stories of mass murders, of torture, of mass rapes. Every family knows someone who had to flee his village or his town to escape the violences. So it's very difficult to imagine how the people of South Sudan could stay together as one country. But last year in October, I was in Juba for the peace celebration, and I was in the POC, the Protection of Civilians camp, where the people which are internally displaced are living. And some of them were going outside of the camp, dancing, singing with the soldiers that were threatening them during the past 5-6 years. And they were asking them for peace. They were asking them to be their brothers and sisters again. So even if it will be difficult for the people of South Sudan to live together again, there is hope. People are willing to live together, yes.
Briefly, Sébastien, there's talk of famine, the UN warning about that. I'm wondering how that can happen, given there's been this relative peace over the past year.
Well, everything was destroyed during the war. People had to flow away from their home, from their villages. All their crops have been destroyed. All their fields have been destroyed. Their cattle have been killed. So they have no food remaining. Then the country is very poorly developed. It's really underdeveloped. There's just, as an example, there is just one tarmac road in South Sudan going from Juba to Uganda, which is the main supplier of goods for South Sudan. The government invests mostly in the army and not in the health sector, not in education, not in food. So people have to rely on themselves and on the United Nations World Food Programme to find food. But it's very difficult for the UN to provide enough food for everybody. And that's why there could be a new famine in the next months.
Bastien Renouy, thank you very much indeed. You can see Bastien's report again via our website, france24.com. This is Reporters on France 24. Please stay with us.